Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us today. Awesome to see some familiar names here and excited to have a few new folks join us today as well. Today, we have myself, Byron Martin, CEO of Technologize, Daniel Morgan, CTO, and also Jamie Moore, cybersecurity specialist. And after today's presentation, we'll have a short Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we proceed throughout the presentation. The days of using firewalls or antivirus to catch and stop breaches are gone. They've been gone for a long time, and you don't have to take my word for it. Cybercrime is a $1 trillion industry. That's and that's all the motivation that the bad guys need. The cyber criminal groups or nation states are extremely organized and efficient in executing attacks. They do their research, they social engineer, and they play on human emotions. Oftentimes, business impact falls around financial loss, disruption of operations, insurance exposure, or reputational damage. So what can we do to take back our businesses from cyber criminals? You know, when there's a breach, it's tough. It's tough not only for business owners, but for everyone in the company. And I've worked with several who've been affected, and had to go through this, and it's tough. It is no fun. And exploitation usually occur via two different methods. One is an internet exposed asset or device, or via phishing email. And attackers often simply look just to get a foothold. They don't need to accomplish the whole hack all at once. They get a foothold, and then they move laterally within the organization.
So one of the most important things you can do in order to decide how to protect yourself from these cyber criminals is really take some steps to understand the way hackers work. You know, a lot of folks have this like mistaken perception that cybercrime or a cyber breach happens in like a moment or an instant. And I blame media a little bit for that, because, you know, you turn on the news and you'll see the latest company name gets hit by, you know, X version of ransomware. And it makes it feel like it just happened in a second, like, bam, they got ransomware. Really, 95% of the cases are actually anywhere from, you know, a couple days to 90 or more days, you know, so we're talking months at that point in the works before the hacker actually hits the go button and encrypts the network. You know, if I'm a hacker, so let me put my black hat on for you guys for a moment. The first thing I do when I'm trying to figure out who I'm going to breach is I have to pick a target. And my next job is to learn as much as I can about my target, to really understand them, understand how they do business, go on LinkedIn, understand who's involved, who the players are. I want to know what their roles are, what type of software, what kind of programs they might be using. I learn a lot about them. Then I figure out, using that knowledge, what I know about them, how am I going to break into this environment? And there's hundreds of different ways to do this. In a, you know, targeted attack like I'm talking about, it could be a insider threat or an exploit in one of their programs that I'm going to use to break in. It could be a 0-day exploit, which is just something new that there aren't patches for yet. Or it could be much less targeted. It could just be that I have a spear phishing email that I'm going to send to a bunch of the employees with the hopes that someone's going to click. And because of the prevalence of these different tools that I have to break in, it doesn't really matter the size of the organization. It's kind of easier to break into a small to mid-sized business than it is to attack a corporate network. So really everyone can be a target, find themselves being a target to this kind of intrusion. Once I break into the environment, I've got a job to do. I got to figure out who I am, what computer did I land on, where in the environment am I located, where in the world am I located, right? Especially if it's a spear phishing attack. And more importantly, I want to know, in this environment, where's the good stuff? Where is the data that I can either ransom or export in order to make the most money off of this breach? From there, I begin to move laterally. I spread laterally from device to device to expand my control, hunt more users, hunt more access, get more data, so that when I finally hit the go button and I complete that objective, they're ransomware. I've already encrypted their backups too. I've already, figured out how to get around their defenses. And so, when you see these big companies get breached, and the small companies too, it isn't a single moment in time. This is a phase. And that's actually a good thing, because it means that we have more places where we can interrupt this process and we can actually win against these attackers.
One of that is one of the biggest things that's for me is incredible, is that it does take an average of 197 days to identify a hack, and then even after that, it takes 69 days to contain it.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those where there's a lot of different metrics out there. We use the 90+ days because we're lasered specifically onto small business. When we're talking about it in this presentation, what we put together, but you're absolutely right. It can be 6 months or more that the bad guy's on the environment. And that's a scary, scary thing.
It is. And so, cybersecurity for us is a lot about finding the right balance between risk and convenience. With modern security, you can have a lot of both without it being a burden, because I know that's a big concern for a lot of folks, is too much security and inconvenience. But really, you can, nowadays, it's matured so much where you can have that cybersecurity without it being a major problem for the organization. And one of the other things that we deal with a lot is how do we avoid fear, uncertainty, and doubt? And a big part of that is just taking the time, thought, and planning to go through it all. I mean, by building kind of processes and routines within the organization and building a plan and building culture around cybersecurity, it makes it alleviates that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I mean, it's simple as starting with just a simple, basic common sense plan, then addressing the most important and immediate gaps right now or this quarter, and then just plan for the next quarter, and so on. It's a journey. It's a step-by-step process. And as long as you're making forward progress, then you're doing well. And that's what we really encourage the people that we talk to, is just do something, because oftentimes it's just nothing is being done. And so do something and just keep moving forward. So 3 simple things that you can do on your own to protect your business. First is passwords. I mean, we hear password comments all the time, more complex passwords, this, that, or the other, about passwords, but it's still a big deal. And that's why we keep bringing it up. So one of the things that we really encourage people to do is use a service such as LastPass, which helps manage passwords. I mean, passwords, they need to be strong, they need to be rotated regularly. And and LastPass really helps you achieve that, or any other, there's other password management tools that can help with that. I will say, however, do not use browsers to save passwords like Chrome or Microsoft Edge. You do not want to do that. For a simple fact, when things are breached and hacked, one of the biggest compromises or the reasons things are compromised out there is because there's a lot of passwords and usernames just sold on the dark web. And so hackers don't even really need to hack. They just buy a huge list of usernames and passwords, and they just go try it out. And they have huge success rates doing that. So there's no hacking involved. So good password practices make a big deal. And the second thing is, email filters of 2 to 3 years ago gave kind of that email filtering a really bad rap, in my opinion. I hated them. They were a problem. They blocked what they weren't supposed to block, and then they didn't block the things that they were supposed to block, and just other problems. Well, nowadays, email filtering have matured so much that they use good AI and machine learning driven solutions that just really work fantastic. But aside from that, we still have to remember, when you're in your email, just remember the basics. Slow down, be cautious of urgent emails, look at the details when in doubt, and then just call the sender if you need to. I mean, even myself, I can't remember. I mean, I have times where I'm like, I can't tell if this is legit or not, and I have to look into it myself. So it happens. But one of the big things you can do that really helps the process at the very get-go is using an email filter. So third thing is enabling multi-factor authentication on everything you can. Now, those of you I've talked to already, you're probably maybe sick of me here of hearing this from me, but it's a reality. There's so many things that can help with multi-factor authentication. It's not perfect, but using it for email, using it for cloud storage devices or services like Dropbox, OneDrive, or banking, financial, especially like social media. But a specific story here in our areas, back in October, there's between a month or so, there was a dozen or more companies that had been hacked, and it all happened because their emails were compromised. And it started out with one business who had their email compromised, and then from there, the bad guys figured out who all the clients were or who the customers were of that business. And then because they had that email account hacked, they sent out emails with a fake invoice attachment, as though it was it was coming from the original business, and sent it to all the customers. And the customers got it, and seeing that it was from a trusted source, they opened them up, they filled out information, they even gave up credentials inadvertently, passwords and stuff, without realizing that it was a hacked email account. And the only reason a lot of them found out about it is because we got a phone call that from one of our clients that said, hey, I'm not sure about this email. I'm not sure if it's right. And they had actually even called the company that supposedly sent the email, and their accounting department, oh yeah, said that it's legit, it's a good email, because we, that's how we send our invoices. And but it still looked bad and so she wasn't sure, and she went ahead because she heard from the company she called and said, okay, I believe them. She entered all her information, and afterwards she's just like realized, no, this just still doesn't feel right. And so she called us, and within a few minutes we realized, no, their email was hacked. This company was hacked. And it happened over a period of 1 to 4 weeks, where a dozen or more businesses here were compromised. So one of the biggest new threats for 2021 is that cyber criminals are not only attacking with ransomware. I had this conversation last week. Somebody said, well, I'll just recover from backup so I don't have to pay the ransom. Well, guess what? Now, instead of just encrypting the data, they're copying all that data to the cloud. So even if you recover from backup, they'll say, well, if you don't pay us the ransom, we're going to sell your data and release it onto the dark web. And University of Utah, just a handful of months ago, they paid $500,000 just so that the ransomware group would not release that data. Even though they had recovered from backup, they still paid that money. And this is now a regular thing that's happening in 2021.
And so, we get asked all of the time, what next? How can we possibly protect ourselves from that, knowing how, the attackers are moving through the environment? And one of the answers to that is there's a missing element when it comes to the majority of security stacks that we fill, and that is the detection and the response. Think about a building, and you've got this big building, you've got all these different rooms, all these different, areas of the building. And if there's smoke in one area, that could lead to a fire, and that fire could spread through the whole building. And that would be a really bad situation. With the right detection mechanism put in place, you can respond. So with a building, we put in fire suppression systems with sprinklers and smoke detectors. And if the smoke detector senses smoke, the sprinkler over the problem spreads the fire suppression stuff out, and we're good, either water or whatever, depending on your system. Cybersecurity can be handled the same way. Managed detection and response is the ability to 24/7 detect threats and then respond to them in real time. So 90% of breaches occur outside of business hours. So you not only need to be watching this environment 8 to 5, you need to be watching and responding around the clock. And that's what we do for you. We are monitoring for malicious tradecraft when we have the managed detection and response service in place, and we are responding to stop these threats. We're killing malicious processes, we're detaining compromised machines, and we do that around the clock because really when it comes down to it, all of this just means that we are actually going to let you just focus on your business and not have to worry about the cyber criminals. Because if we can detect that smoke on one computer and respond to it on that one device right when it happens and stop that spread to all the other devices in the environment, we can make a huge, huge change for you. And that's what we'd like to do. And there are a lot of benefits to it. Not only is there a benefit for your business to stay secure, but you can also achieve compliance this way. And I cannot stress strongly enough that compliance does not equal security, right? That you can be both compliant and secure, which is amazing. So what we do with our compliance module is we give a comprehensive checklist of the requirements. We can export that for you. And when you pair that with the best early detection, early stage breach detection, which is the service that we provide for you, you have just the best of both worlds. You have a secure environment that is also compliant. You have the ability to, again, focus on your business goals and not worry about all of those reports and the auditors that you have to send off on a regular basis, because that's no fun.
So, so I also here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And just touch on one thing that we are offering for free, because what we're really trying to do for our clients and for the public is offer some good education on, what are things that they can do to stay productive, but also secure, especially with these new hybrid remote situations that we live in. And part of this, we're investing a lot into this. And part of it, there'll be weekly homework based on the subjects covered. There'll be worksheets, planning documents, and example policies and checklists and more, really to help everybody become more compliant, whether it's with CMMC or whether it's with HIPAA or other healthcare things. And so this is something that if you'll, in the follow-up email, you'll have an ability to register for this or sign up for this. Or you can shoot me an email, byronm@technologize.com, and just let me know if you're interested, and we'll get you signed up for that. Do we have any other questions? I think we're about out of time here, so I want to be true to the allotted time that we've scheduled. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and say, invite everybody as well to another webinar that we're going to have at the end of April on how ransomware, or can ransomware strike the cloud. And that's caught a lot of companies, a lot of individuals by surprise. And we want to, again, provide the education so people understand and know where that risk and vulnerability is at. And there's some real simple things they can do to protect themselves. And that's what we really want to empower businesses, business owners, and users to be able to protect themselves from these threats. Any other thoughts, Dan or Jamie? Is there anything else that we want to touch on that maybe I missed today? We kind of ran through a bunch of stuff real fast because we try to cram stuff in the 30-minute time frame. So if there's questions out there, or if anybody has, Dan or Jamie, if you have anything else you want to add, we can spend a minute going over it, or we can go ahead and wrap it up.
So I think the thing that I always like to end on is that you don't have to feel overwhelmed by all of the possible tools and options and concepts to think about when it comes to cybersecurity. You just have to have one solid partner to go to who will manage this for you, will become the experts. It is a hard thing to stay up to date and current on all of the cybersecurity. So if you partner with Technologize and let us run that for you, we're going to put you in a good spot, and we're really going to take care of you. And that's important to us in order to make sure that you've got all your bases covered, right? And so that's what we're here for, and we'll worry about it so you don't have to.
Yeah, and and it is nice. I'm glad you brought that up as far as
Mm.
the feeling overwhelmed, because it can be. It's a lot of
Yeah.
it's. I mean, I'm not an accountant. I'm not an attorney. I'm not, I'm not an expert in all these things, and and it can be doing my taxes. Is overwhelming. I mean, there's a lot of things there. That. So, but the truth is anybody, if you have there's a lot of things that you can do on your own that are just basic, simple, that you can just start with,
Yeah.
like the things we talked about today,
Mhm.
or and it just takes time. And the fact that if you're doing something and making progress and moving forward with it, that's what's important. Just ignoring it, not doing anything, is where people fall into into a big trap, and in unhappy or really bad circumstances. So, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. If there are no other comments, questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon. Have a great weekend.